No money, no school, and a young orphan at 9, Henry Royce had a rough life. So, how on earth do you go from a paperboy in London to owning a $7 billion business empire? Welcome to the fascinating story of the most iconic car maker in the world. Rolls-Royce is known for creating some of the most high-end cars in the world. So you're probably wondering where this epic motor journey starts. Stick around, cause the truth will shock you. Growing up, this guy had no formal education, but he had one redeeming quality. He was skilled with his hands. And thanks to a generous aunt who agreed to pay for his apprenticeship at the railway company, Royce was now tinkering with his favorite kind of toys, electronics. Sadly, 3 years in, Henry had to drop out due to lack of funds, forcing the 17-year-old to work for a tool manufacturing company in Leeds, making just 1 penny per hour. But before moving to an electric power company in Liverpool, Royce figured out what exactly he needed to do. Saving up whatever little he had, by 19, Royce enrolled himself in evening classes at the City and Guilds Institute, all psyched up to explore his passion for science and engineering. Going on to become the youngest chief electrician to work for Maxim Weston Electric when the company tanked out in 1884 and he was out of a job again. Royce knew he had had enough. Taking a leap of faith, that same year, Henry decides to launch his own company called F.H. Royce. With only $20 to his name, Royce was about to take the greatest risk of his life. But thankfully, he wasn't all alone. His good friend Ernest Claremont had agreed to join in his industrial cause, so the two men pulled in whatever little savings they had to set up a small shop to make electrical fittings. Remember, even though Royce came from humble beginnings with no training, he knew his craft like a real pro. And after lots of testing, the two engineers finally managed to create their first successful product, the electric doorbell. These began to sell out quickly, so the brainy duo moved on to bigger and more complex products like generators and electric cranes. Which means as their products got more popular, cash flow increased. And by 1899, the company's share capital was valued at £30,000. Now, keep in mind, it may not sound like a lot to you now. Accounting for the inflation over the years, you were looking at $1 million in today's time. Also remember, in those days, very few people in London actually owned cars. But of course, being the big machine geek he was, Henry was one of the first few to develop a keen interest in automobiles. In 1901, he bought a used French Decauville that he began to obsessively fix up. Turning it better than new overnight, this was the moment Royce knew what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. But it wasn't until 1904 that Royce finally launched his first motor car, the Royce 10. Of course, keeping the first pride piece for himself, Royce gave the second one to his business partner. But hey, you know what they say, the third time is the real charm. So when this third car was bought by a car dealer named Henry Edmund, this guy was so smitten by the quality of this work, he knew he had to help this car genius spread the word about his luxurious new car. Often called the company's godfather, it is this guy who hooked Royce up with his friend Charles Rolls. The rest, as they say, is history. Rolls meets Royce. On May 4th, 1904, when Royce finally met Mr. Charles Rolls in the city of Manchester, he probably had no idea he was about to meet a man who would put his car brand on the map. Within minutes of spinning around in Royce's twin-cylinder 10 HP, Charles knew he had found exactly what he was looking for. But here's the thing, besides a shared love of cars, the two men were worlds apart. And it wasn't just the massive age gap between 41-years-old Henry and Rolls, who was just 26 at the time. But the two men were also brought up in polar opposite ways. Unlike Royce, who never really went to school or college, Charles Rolls was born to riches. Enjoying a fancy education at Trinity College in Cambridge, Rolls had a real passion for fast cars. In fact, he wasn't just an avid car enthusiast, but also an eager aviator who would later go on to fly over 200 flights in a Wright Flyer aircraft. But hey, we digress. Back to the fateful union of Rolls and Royce. When Charles met Henry for the first time, he was smart enough to realize he may just have shared a meal with the greatest motor engineer in the world. Thanks to his connections in the upper class of Europe, Charles was also the perfect face for the new brand. Selling the fancy car to as many lovely lords and ladies as he could get on board, over the next couple of decades, demands for Rolls-Royce reached an all-time high. In fact, by 1921, there was such a massive demand for the car that there was a 3-year backlog of production. Even today, a century on, Rolls-Royce is one of the rarest and most sought-after cars in the world. With each part crafted by hand, did you know it takes 6 months to build one Rolls-Royce? Royce was knighted by the British government, and by 1930, it seemed all those years of hard labor, poor diet, and sleepless nights were finally catching up with Royce. In fact, did you know the motor geek drew his last drawings on his deathbed? Crazy, right? Even the night before he died, Royce found himself drawing an adjustable shock absorber, asking his nurse to send it to his workers at the factory. Sadly, he died before the letter was delivered. From his instinctive desire for perfection to the sheer level of commitment this guy had, there are very few who can say they have changed the automobile industry like this guy. Even fewer can claim to have done so without a formal degree in science. Launching his own company at just 22, it's no secret that Henry Royce is one of the most successful self-made men of the 20th century.